Throughout the last year, I am sure many of us have learned what it is like to live in isolation. While that may have been tough or easy for some of you, the extreme isolation that the people on my list today have gone through, without a doubt, seems way harder. Well, for most of them. Hey everyone, Dewey Stewart back and ready to give you another amazing top 10 list, but wait, hold on a sec. All of you watching, just move your eyes over to the left and take a look at your subscriptions. Go to the B section and look for a new channel called Bumblebee. And if you don't see it there, then what are you doing? The amazing Rachel Fisher and I launched our brand new channel Bumblebee just last week, and we want you all to join in on the fun, so make sure to go like and subscribe to our hive ASAP. Other than that, I think it's time to get started with today's list, so get ready as today I take you through the top 10 people who live in extreme isolation. Now let's get to it. Starting us off at number 10, we have John Bigg. Back in 1649, after the execution of Charles I, John Bigg was believed to be one of the executioners. Charles' death was met with a ton of disapproval and backlash. Bigg's boss, named Simon Maine, was one of the judges at the trial for Charles I and was later put on trial in 1660 and found guilty of regicide. He then died in the Tower of London before his appeal. Possibly out of fear or guilt, John Bigg then moved to an underground cave just beneath Maine's home, Dinton Hall, and lived there for the rest of his days. The last time he was seen was in an 18th century illustration looking like a true man of the woods. Whether it was out of grief or fear, I doubt living in a cave for the rest of your days by yourself is a fun time. Maybe if you had a few pets, but then again, cave pets don't really sound the friendliest. At our number 9 spot, we have Dorothy Paget. Paget was quite the eccentric racehorse owner and quite the accomplished rider too. As she grew out of her youth, she did begin to put on a lot of weight, and sadly that made a lot of people tease her and bully her. It was also said that other than a few of her racetrack cronies, the company of men made her vomit. Honestly, if the people around you have disgusting personalities, I don't blame you one bit, Dorothy. She congratulated one of her prize-winning racehorses once, and many people teased her for saying that that horse would be the only guy she would ever kiss. That's terrible. She could be rude and curt herself, but she also suffered from extreme shyness. As I can only suspect from all of the bullying and shyness, she started locking herself in bathroom stalls until whenever the bathroom was actually cleared out of people. She couldn't even talk to her staff, so she left them notes as a way of communicating with them, and she didn't even want to use their names. She knew her employees as different colors. At age 54, she finally began living as a recluse at home and locked herself up with tons of copies of The Sporting Life, which she then used to place her bets over the phone. She would sleep through the day and work through the night. She lived like this all the way up to her death when, after no response, one of her color-coded staff found her at home deceased. This one kind of breaks my heart because you know there's some mental health stuff going on here as well as a terrible case of bullying, but hey, at least she had her horses. At number 8, we have Ken Tustin. Ken Tustin for a while was quite the lonely hunter. He spent decades alone for months on end in the Fiordland wilderness on the west coast of New Zealand and trying to spot the Great Canadian Moose. Back in 1900, a group of moose were brought over to New Zealand to bring the species to a new part of the world, but sadly, 10 of the moose died on the voyage there. Then in 1910, another boat of moose was delivered, but once again the numbers weren't great. After that, these animals were infrequently spotted in the area all the way up to 1953. Practically everyone believed these moose died out and that they would never be seen again. So, Tustin spent a great deal of his life out there all by himself in search for his Canadian moose. There were hairs later found that gave evidence that the descendants of the moose were still living there, but to his surprise, back in 2020, a man came knocking on Tustin's door and said, "You better make a cup of tea. We just seen a moose." It was a young pilot that was flying over the area and spotted what he knew to be a moose. So Tustin went back one more time, just a bit further north, to finally see his Canadian moose. At number 7, we have Blanche Monnier. Blanche was a beautiful young brunette woman in Poitiers, France, and fell in love with a man who was under her social class. Mom and dad said that that was a big no-no, and they punished her quite severely. They locked her up in her family's basement, where Blanche was starved, naked, and wasn't given a washroom, all the while the basement was completely in darkness. Her only companions down there were the rats she so generously shared her bread with. Blanche was trapped in the basement for 25 years, and when she finally was rescued by French police, she found out that she would never see her true love again, as he tragically died 16 years prior. She later recovered physically from her horrific 25 years locked away, but never recovered mentally. She suffered from many different mental health issues all the way up to her death in 1913. Absolutely tragic, and this is one story that goes to show you how bad isolation really can be, especially under the conditions that Blanche was in. At number 6, we have the 5th Duke of Portland. Way back in the Victorian era lived William John Cavendish Scott Bentnett, the 5th Duke of Portland. It was reported that the Duke was basically a real-life version of the classic Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde. He spent the last part of his life living in isolation on the family estate of Welbeck Abbey. He even built many different tunnels underground and secret passageways where I guess he would go to get away from himself. He had servants and people to help build his underground passageways and even a ballroom. But if staff were to be within his presence, no matter for how short of time, they were instructed to basically ignore him and pretend like he wasn't even there, or else they would be fired. He had one of the largest ballrooms that could fit around 1,000 people, but the only person to ever enjoy the large party room was himself. Before he died, he would even have the doctor yell for his diagnosis underneath his bedroom door. The Duke would slip notes back to him, so you know. Why was he isolated though? Well, he did lead quite the public life before he went into hiding, so maybe he just got sick of people. And honestly, dude, I get it. Coming in at our halfway point, we have John Slater. Slater is a former Royal Marine Commando and definitely an English eccentric. Slater left the military and immediately after went on a mission of self-discovery. He went and lived amongst the homeless of London and worked countless strange jobs, and even at one point offered to go on exhibit at the London Zoo so he could show off as a human. Yeah, very strange, and he was definitely turned down. He did later receive a world record for walking the entire length of Great Britain. After that achievement, he moved into a remote oceanfront cave on the west coast of Scotland. He would stay up there for 4 months at a time, and he did this for about 10 years straight. Twice a day he was forced to gather his belongings and move back in the cave because of the incoming tides, as well at night he would be covered in many rats. Isn't that nice? Oddly enough, this man was married, and to everyone's surprise, she was not really for this cave style life, and they eventually did end up divorcing each other. Slater then went on record about his time that he spent in the cave, and he said, "There's also a cathedral-like silence which helps me think. I'm addicted to harmony, restlessness. You realize that the planets breathing that same energy moving through these stones is moving your heart." Sounds kinda nice, but I don't know about those rats though. He one day wants to release his newfound insights from the cave with his hand muppet called Muddy the Frog. John and Muddy, I think I'm okay. I'm just gonna stick to my other self-help books if you don't mind me. At number 4, we have Mary Molesworth. Mary Molesworth was quite the talented and stunning woman. Many men wanted to marry her, including the Colonel Rockfort, but the problem was Mary wasn't that big on him. Unfortunately, her father forced her to marry him and had several children with him as well. But the Colonel would leave for work on many occasions, and when he returned, he later discovered that his wife had been cheating on him with his own brother. So what did he do? He locked her away, and she escaped once, where she then fled to her family. Although her father was so angry that he immediately sent her back to her terrible husband. She was then locked away for 16 years in Galstown and was only set free because of the Earl's death in 1774. Coming out of her terrible isolation, she never really recovered. Her hair went snow white, she had a new tragic, scared look in her eyes constantly, and her voice was always trembling. It truly was a heartbreaking matter. The case of Mary Molesworth is one of the most famous 18th century scandals ever, and I think it's pretty easy to see why. Starting us off in our top 3, at number 3 we have Christopher Knight. After graduating high school in 1984, Knight was ready to join the workforce in the land of computers, but one day packed up and left for the Maine woods and never looked back. He spent a total of 27 years out in the woods before he was brought in by the authorities. He would steal anything he believed he needed from nearby homes and would rob them in the night. He would steal everything from sleeping bags, clothing, propane, batteries for his radio and Game Boy, and of course tons and tons of food. He was known to meditate on his overturned bucket, play his Game Boy, listen to his radio, and read books and magazines, and he also liked to get drunk. Aside from all the crime stuff, this doesn't sound like a bad existence, and honestly sounds like my kind of quarantine experience. But when he was finally arrested, he was brought into a 6-person jail cell and started therapy for his mental issues. However, apparently he was never found to be mentally ill, he just wanted to be alone. I recently found my old Game Boy, and honestly, I get it. Once I booted up Pokemon Blue again, I didn't want anyone to bother me either. At number 2, we have terrible Tommy Silverstein. Silverstein is one of America's most violent and notorious criminals. He was jailed for armed robbery in 1977 and was then given the life sentence with no parole after taking the life of 2 of his inmates. He was also then put into isolation after taking the life of a prison guard. After spending some time in solitary confinement in Atlanta, he was then moved to the bowels of Leavenworth Prison for 18 years, before he was then moved to ADX Florence, a super maximum prison in Colorado. It has been described as the clean version of hell. Yikes. He spent a total of 36 years in solitary confinement and to no one's surprise, suffered many mental health struggles while being locked away. He recently passed away in 2019 due to complications and heart surgery, but I honestly am surprised that those doctors went anywhere close to him. I wouldn't want to get too close with a guy like that with all those sharp things. I don't think so. And finally, coming in at our number 1 spot, we have an old favorite, the Man of the Hole, also known as the Last Tribesman or the Loneliest Man on Earth. This guy was discovered in the Amazon rainforest back in 1996. No one knows the man's origin, but all we do know is that he can be seen from place to place all around the rainforest, where he digs 6-foot deep holes and fills them with straw. It is believed he lives in these holes as well as uses them as traps for animals so he can feed off of them. But no one can speak his language or even get close to him, because if you do, he will shoot you with an arrow. So this is a guy who lives basically untouched by any modern humans, and he actually sounds like he enjoys it. While he hasn't been spotted in quite a while, I think that's what he wants. So how about we just leave him be? The Brazilian government also made it illegal to trespass on his property. They made it his property. So that's nice of them. There you have it. That has been our top 10 people who live in extreme isolation. Some of these were absolutely tragic, and others honestly didn't sound that bad. I mean, chilling deep in the woods with plenty of food and a Game Boy? Freaking sign me up. But hey, what's your ideal isolation situation? Where would you go and what would you bring? Let me know down in the comments, and don't forget to like and subscribe down below. Not just here, but also on Bumblebee. I've been your host, Dewey Stewart. Hope you all enjoyed the video today, folks, and I will see you all very soon. Unless I flee for the forest with my Game Boy, because that's a vibe. Bye-bye. John Bigg was at our number spot. Oh, man, at our number spot? That's nice. Get those itches and rubs out of there. Oh shit. Was that 7 that I just did? Yep, okay, cool. I thought I skipped it. Woo! Slater left the Howeverly, oh my god. What is that?